Hey, it's Leave and the Lit Dude welcoming you to the inaugural episode of Dragon Song, the one and the only podcast exclusively for fans of Breath of Fire around the world. We're your hosts, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Livnat.
And today's episode is called Into the Fire because we're going to be talking about why Breath of Fire is so special and why we think it deserves to be revived. Okay, so just to introduce ourselves, I'm Jordan and I run a YouTube channel called Ancient Literature Dude. I once ran a YouTube channel called Bragateer on which I did video game music covers, among which were a number of Breath of Fire covers. And I actually met Livnat through Breath of Fire on a little website that you might know called Dragonteer that is unfortunately down now, but was once a very thriving center for fandom of Breath of Fire. It was a forum and it had artwork and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, I started off like as a member and soon was a moderator and soon a global moderator. We did a lot of stuff over there, basically gathering all the community into one spot. Unfortunately, right now we cannot revive the site. The domain name is apparently being held hostage by a ridiculous sum of money. So
it's like Gobi has gotten his hands on it, you know. So just so you all know, Breath of Fire fans, there's real life villainy in the world. Somebody in Aria has gotten their villainous hands on it, and yeah, they're holding it hostage for you know an insane sum of money.
Yeah. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I tried to revive the site. Right now, because a lot of reason. Many of them has to do with minimal participation and fewer post rating. I believe that nowadays forums are basically more or less are not the same medium they used to be to bring community together, especially not in a day where everything is so instant and
No, I think that the internet has become a much more fast-paced place, and the good news is that there's now a relatively popular Breath of Fire Discord, and we're going to provide links to that in the description for the podcast, and hope that you'll go and check it out if you haven't already. It's got a pretty good number of members, and it's growing, and it's a pretty good way to kind of check up on what's going on in the fandom and with general Breath of Fire news.
We also have a Facebook page. You can find it by going to Facebook and type in with desire Breath of Fire and reach our page. We also have a Discord group if you want to stay in touch with a lot of familiar names and face. You can definitely find us there. Basically, a little about ourselves. I'm a huge Breath of Fire fan. It was my first RPG. I ran into this game particularly by mistake. In my country, Israel, we don't have the same gaming culture as most of you probably are familiar with. A lot of our games, we kind of had to do a lot of shaddies ways to get our hands on him. I ended up playing this game on emulator. I didn't know what an RPG was until I played Breath of Fire. I keep saying, telling the story about, me, first of all, starting this game. I didn't know you should save the game. I didn't know you needed to switch equipment. I basically didn't know what to read. I couldn't even, understand most of the text.
That probably made the frog boss pretty difficult, yeah. Right? Like the very first boss of the game.
In fact, I remember killing the frog boss at least 3 times. And then I said, okay, this is enough. I don't want to advance in this game. There's no way I'm going to finish it in one go. So back in the days of the old internet access, which is still kind of like that in some part of the world. When you're trying to download a Britney Spears song and if your mom got a call, there's no song, at least you got to re-download it again. So in this age...
The dial-up days, for those of us too young to remember that.
Yeah, with weird noises from hell. Anyway, I decided to explore a little bit about this site. I think about a year later, I ran into Dragon Tier. I understood like this game has a sequel. I really like the concept of the game. I searched for picture and then I found a girl with wings. By the way, I was sure that Ryu was a woman. That's one of the reasons I really like to play this game. And then I was like, oh, cool, like there's a girl with wings. I definitely want to check this series. To anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a huge fan of everything that has to do with mythological stories and a lot of Bible stories. So if you actually want to get my interest on something, it has to have demons and angel in them.
And Breath of Fire definitely has demons and angels.
Yeah.
2 especially
Yeah.
it served as a real starting point for a lot of fans of the series because it has such a striking and very in your face, religious theme.
Exactly.
And a religious storyline. So yeah, it's I think it's very remarkable in the history of JRPGs.
So eventually, like, I realized you need to save the game. Eventually, I reached level 40s without even realizing you need to change equipment. I was OP. I beat the game like really fast. There was one point where I realized I needed to do certain things that I didn't, which made my character even be more OP because I level up to gain money for a certain area in the game. Whoever doesn't know, now is the time because the game is now available on Switch. From here to there, I realized that I really love the story. I really love the character. I love the world. I love the game. But I definitely fell in love with the series starting the second game, even though the first will always have a special place in my heart. I know many people mentioned that the first didn't age well. I still think it was one of the strongest JRPG I ever played. It opened up my appetite for playing games. It certainly helped me to improve my English. I wanted to learn English because I wanted to be part of the Breath of Fire community. I think Casey, the creator of Dragon Tear, still makes fun of me about the fact that I didn't know how to spell angel very well. But this is all a story.
I think this is a really fascinating point that Breath of Fire, and not of course just Breath of Fire, but JRPGs in general serve as a beginning point for so many people wanting to learn English because it's such a compelling thing to follow along with these stories. And, let's face it, Japanese is very prohibitive. It's very difficult to pick up on the kanji and, written Japanese. And English has become such a universal language for gaming that gaming itself, especially JRPGs, have become kind of a bridge to English for many people. Mm-hmm. And I find that amazing that Breath of Fire was kind of the impetus for you to pick up the language. Personally, unlike you, I didn't start with the first game. I actually started with 2, as you know. I was in junior high, and a friend of mine recommended it to me. His mom worked at the local video store, and he had rented it and checked it out and just told me it was really phenomenal. And it was the first game that I had ever played with that kind of a standard anime art style. And I was not an anime fan or a manga fan. You have to remember this is sort of the mid-90s. And I wasn't really familiar with those mediums, but I fell in love with the art style of Breath of Fire. So I was coming to it as a kind of a new fan to this general art style, and I found it really compelling and very bright and very beautiful, sort of distinguished from other JRPGs at the time, like Final Fantasy, which were a little bit darker and more muted in tone by this point, especially with 6. And so I rented the game as, a kind of a young kid and just immediately fell in love with it. I only later came back to 1. And, you and I have somewhat different views about the way that 1 stands in opposition to 2.
That's right.
In terms of, how ultimately well they've aged, now. But I think we can both agree that they're very good games in their own right, and yes, that they began this wonderful series that we have come to love so much.
Yeah, I think the only issue or problem I have with it felt like Breath of Fire 1 definitely had something of a world building to it, which was, in my opinion, got abandoned. I still remember there was certain timelines and the whole stories of of the key and the goddess, which I think was kind of pushed under the rug, being forgotten or being completely wrecked on or changed, which is kind of sad. I never understood, for example, how they took Miria / Tyr, who was definitely the embodiment of evil, and trying to still work with it in Breath of Fire 3 into something more benevolent goddess, but still very selfish or very self-righteous kind of goddess. So they also change a lot of concept. They used to be a lot more racist in the first game. There used to be some ideas with more mechanical robots, which I think they tried to remake them for 3 and definitely with 4. But a lot of these ideas, I guess, got scrapped away to change the fairies or the Warren that kind of makes an appearance from the second game.
Right.
Which completely disappeared from the first game. Karen or Dunk character of a shaman race that was completely rechanged, remade. I would say it probably because of a lot of issue regarding the race of this character, but we will get to it probably at some other podcast.
Right, Karn is very fascinating,
Yeah.
but I want to get back to this issue of the characterization, the kind of shifting characterization of Tyr / Miria from 1, and she's mentioned in 2, and then reappears in a larger role in 3. This depiction of Tyr / Miria as at first a more malevolent, and then, as you say, a more benevolent goddess figure, I find very fascinating, because to me it offers a more nuanced view of divinity and of gods than most JRPGs tend to. There's this fascinating trend in JRPGs to depict God or gods in very negative terms, and Breath of Fire started to turn that around. By the 3rd game in the series, and then continuing in the 4th game, you have Miria and Fao Lu as these gods who are somewhat justifiable. They have, real justifications, and they have complexity as characters, and they're somewhat empathetic, especially Fao Lu. We start to continue with that trend a bit more, and I think that most players find Fao Lu very sympathetic and understandable. As enraged and homicidal as he is, there's a reason for it. We see why he's come to be this way. And
to me, it always felt like Breath of Fire tried to deal with the idea of divinity in the sense of like, they are gods, but they are still humans for their own races. What I'm trying to mean, like, they are not above their emotion. They're not about their ideology. They're very pantheon type of characters. They're just like the Olympic god. They're not like the traditional Christianity or Judaism type of almighty god. There's something very different, very something that's very easy to connect with. In the games, we even see that we can destroy them, even though they are gods. That kind of put the whole meaning of God into a question. But I also see from other Capcom games, this is a very thematical subject to them. The idea of God is not the God that we want to believe. It's more like a force. It's more like something or a being that has a certain amount of power. So
I do think that Breath of Fire's depiction of gods is, as you say, more primal, more, in my mind, more in line with the depiction of the Norse gods, who are very human. They're very relatable. They have very distinct personalities, and they're not so distant, as you say, as the Judeo-Christian God or the Abrahamic God. So
I would like to take a moment to say that I'm very happy to announce that Breath of Fire 1 and 2 are now available on the Switch port. And what it means a lot for us as fans, because it's another channel for anyone new who was not familiar with the series to connect with it. The series had 5 successful game, with a very poor attempt from Capcom side to try to revive the series with Breath of Fire 6.
I don't know what you're talking about,
didn't-
Midnot. We don't talk about Breath of Fire 6 in this. Breath of Fire 6 is a mythical future game that may or may not ever arrive, but it has not happened yet. It's not a real thing that we accept as a reality, okay?
Breath of Fire 6 was supposed to be a new direction for the series.
Yeah, it was a new direction, all right.
Yeah, as far as the people at Capcom thought that this series could be more successful on the mobile. Kind of remind me the whole fiasco of Don't You Guys Have Fun with the Diablo Immortal. Basically what they tried to do was release episodes. Whoever doesn't play a mobile game is not very familiar with this type of progression. I think it was a very bad way to revive the series. I think the attempt was good. I just think they really completely ruin it. The series was disconnected not too long ago. Not all the plot was revolved. Apparently, it did absorb some of its plot sources from Breath of Fire 1 and maybe Breath of Fire 2 and 4. The artwork was not bad, but if Breath of Fire 5 took a completely different direction in art style, then Breath of Fire 6 was a completely new way to look at the series, which didn't fell well with the other fans, me included.
Yeah, it was mostly received as a kind of a poor attempt at segueing into the mobile game world, and it apparently didn't really stand on its own legs in Japan. It was never ported to the West, for better or worse. But
I do want to take a moment and say that now that the game are on Switch, it will be more accessible to probably newer audience. At my workplace, I work in a community center. I have a few children there that have the Switch. Probably none of them ever played the SNES or ever was familiar with the series, and now they did hear about it and they did download the game and they did play it. I know a lot of my friends are now considering because the Switch is an easier port. Even though I don't like the system personally because of petty reasons, I'm really happy that Capcom did brought the game into the Switch. My only issue is I wish they did enable us to get the Game Boy Advance version with it, but that's an issue for another time.
No, I'm very excited that the games
yes.
were ported to Switch because, as you said, I have friends now, and friends my age who grew up with an SNES but just never had a chance to check out the series because, let's face it, Breath of Fire was not very well known even in its own time. I mean, it took me forever to track down a copy of the game at Blockbuster, in order for me to own it. And the game now has a kind of a cult following, which is really amazing that the series has been essentially defunct for so long, and there's still this very passionate fan base for the game. And Capcom is still doing ports. They're still releasing art books, and I've seen it on Twitter that every time a new port is announced, every time that a new port arrives, as on the Switch, We Desire Breath of Fire, starts popping up again, and I see a pretty good number of people checking out the game, and even the first game, which may not be the most popular game in the series, seemed to be received pretty well on Twitter. I saw nothing but positive feedback about it from new players who were going back and checking it out for the first time.
I see a lot of cool artwork, which is amazing. Like my Twitter feed and especially my Facebook page and other media sources are filled with a lot of artworks, which also mean that this game has regained some attention. some deserving attention. I would even extend and say that our community is not just interested in only in the game. Not long ago, we had a few T-shirts being made. For example, the recent Destiny Child T-shirt by Fangamer, which we kind of try and collect every merchandise, be it original soundtrack, being the game music actually available on Spotify and other sources. Myself as an artist, I really enjoy drawing the characters. I really enjoy seeing a lot of artwork. I'm trying to promote it as much as possible. I don't know if we will get to cover it, but in fact in Discord we are now trying to do some kind of a Santa and an elf type of game where we draw or create something for the community in Discord as gifts for Christmas. So all in all, I feel like the series may be starting to get some spike, but it's definitely not enough. That's why we're trying to promote this podcast, to call attention and to tell people that if you've been a fan for so long like we did, or if you're new to the series, or even if you find this remotely interesting, now it's the time to reach out as much as possible to Capcom and other channels that could help us promote the series and tell the guys up there that even though we already have Resident Evil 2 and 3 and a lot of cameo appearing in Street Fighter, for example, Cat outfit in Falke in Street Fighter 5, it's definitely not enough. We definitely want more attention to this series.
The very simplest thing you can do is hashtag We Desire Breath of Fire. Just get that out there, use it as much as possible. Let Capcom see that there are still fans of the series. And, one of the biggest issues I think is that evidently JRPGs sort of struggle in today's market. Unless you're a massive remake, or a kind of a re-release like FF7 or 8 now recently on the Switch, it's very hard for a new game, even in an existing franchise, to make an impact and sell well. But I see enough interest in the series that I think it may be warranted.
The Mana series just got a whole completely remake and repainting. The third game in the Mana series, Trial of Mana, just going to be remade, which is exciting.
It's very exciting. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, but part of me of asking, like, Capcom, what about us? We have been loyal fan of your JRPG.
And we know, like you said, we know that remakes and re-releases are working right now, and the ports alone have done pretty well.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say that, like, we as a customer, we would definitely buy and promote. And we tried not long ago to promote Breath of Fire 4 being shifted to either GOG or Steam or other.
Yes,
media.
we need Breath of Fire 4 on other platforms for sure. I don't know whether it's possible or not, but I would love to see Breath of Fire 3 and 4 maybe on Switch. Like I said, I don't know how likely it is since they were Sony originally. They were PlayStation exclusives originally.
But Breath of Fire 4 did add a PC version.
Right.
That's why I'm saying it's even easier. Just get it. Just do it. Okay.
So hey, Livnat, I'd like to shift gears here for a minute and talk about one of the principal themes of this podcast, which is just what exactly makes Breath of Fire so special. And yeah, along those lines, I want to take a moment and remind fans of exactly what this series is about. If you look at Breath of Fire, many people from the outside may see a series that has some of the standard features of JRPGs. They see turn-based combat. They see typical fantasy fare like dragons and knights and things like this. But how many games allow you to become the dragon? How many games allow you to and develop this wider mythology of a dragon clan and a dragon family, and I think this gets at what makes Ryu fascinating as a point of view character, because how many JRPGs specifically really allow you to become that mythical beast that we all, think is so fascinating, right? That we're so mesmerized by.
Yes.
It's a simple concept, but I think that Breath of Fire does it very uniquely.
I think that, first of all, at least with the first game, they definitely tried to break tradition. Up until now, it was the knight saving the princess from the dragon, and now it's the dragon saving the princess from the knight.
That's right.
So this is type of interesting. They also really enjoy taking a theme from a lot of myths and legend and twisted them. We will get to a specific topic about it very soon, especially about Breath of Fire 2 and the connection to the Dark Trinity, as we like to call it. But definitely Breath of Fire is very special because I don't think it's a typical JRPG. First of all, I think this game says little, but it's enough to get the idea across without boring the players. The text is very minimal, but it doesn't need that excessive dialogue, aka Final Fantasy. To everyone listening,
by the
Final
way,
Fantasy is not my favorite series at all. I really don't enjoy the series. I think one of the problems is that I feel like it's very excessive. Too much information, too much story, too much dialogue. I feel like the points are lost into it. And I feel Breath of Fire try to really get you emotional without saying a lot. I feel like in terms of dialogue, the game just nail it with the right amount of text and feeling.
Well, this is something that I talked to the Well-Read Mage about recently on his podcast on MageCast when we spoke about the original Final Fantasy on episode 34, Sakaguchi's Last Stand, which check out, by the way. I think that there's a very fine line that RPGs in general and JRPGs in particular have to thread in terms of how much dialogue is too much. They want to convey the story, but they don't want to over-convey it, right? They don't want to over-dramatize it. They don't want to extend into melodrama. And I tend to think now that, especially in recent years, RPGs have become too cinematic. Games in general have become too cinematic. They're trying too hard to both tell without showing, and also just sheerly showing too much, again, in terms of these kind of cinematic qualities that the games have developed. And I know that there are players of the early Breath of Fire games that don't care for the relative brevity of the dialogue, but I think that as in the case of many early JRPGs, there's something to be said for allowing the player and even forcing the player to read between the lines. I do find that in going back and looking at the original Breath of Fire, the history of the Light and Dark Dragon clans is very fascinating, and it's kind of intriguing to try to figure out exactly where some of the characters were coming from, because I think that we're told just enough to find them empathetic, we're told enough to find them fascinating, but we're not bogged down with a bunch of backstory. We're not weighed down so much that the game can't progress, in terms of its for gameplay's sake, so that the actual gameplay is affected.
I feel like one of the issues for that is probably the problem with translation back in the days, but it definitely, if I can bring back an older game that remind me that, I think of Phantasy Star 2, where the character just appear in a sequence to help Rudo to fight the game, and they just appear constantly. And even though there's a few background about them, there's not too much, but you still get very emotional and connected to them. However, they definitely switch it up a little bit on Breath of Fire 2. They nail it completely with the feeling and the idea. Just enough information to help you build, but at the same time enough space for you to create in your head exactly what's going on, which is great.
And I think that's why Breath of Fire and Phantasy Star both have been so popular with fan fiction communities. I've seen fan fiction and fan comic books and things of that nature developed around Breath of Fire and Phantasy Star, and I think that's why they remain so compelling. Okay, so another thing that I think makes Breath of Fire so unique is that it tackles much deeper themes than other JRPGs. I think it arguably has a deeper and more nuanced overall story, and let me give you an example of that. The first game introduces this discussion about gods with Tyr, right? Well, that was only the first game. They're sort of developing their whole mythology. By the time you get to Breath of Fire 2, we had just in the intro a depiction of God, or in this case a false god, that was so profoundly disturbing that fans still remember the sheer imagery of it to this day. I mean, the intro itself has become sort of legendary. And so Breath of Fire 2 as a whole becomes this very remarkable sort of video game form of a philosophical answer to Pascal's wager. This idea that, hey, if you believe in a benevolent God, you can only benefit from it, right? Because if your belief is proven to be correct and there is a good God, you'll be rewarded for it. And if there isn't, well, heck, you'll just die and fade into nothingness anyway, and there's no problem. But Breath of Fire 2 points out a very real refutation there, a very real problem with this dichotomy. It's a false dichotomy. A good God, a benevolent God, is not the only conceivable type of deity that could exist. And it's very easy for religion and even for faith to become distorted and perverted. And throughout the series, as the series continues, we have a continually evolving view of divinity with a more sympathetic Miria in 3 and even more sympathetic Faolu in 4, onto, of course, the more depressing kind of final boss in 5. But what do you think, Livnot? How do you think Breath of Fire differs from other JRPGs in handling very, very serious topics and themes?
I think the first thing I noticed that it doesn't try to just create creature by the names, like Ashtaroth. Let's take it and make a demon called Ashtaroth. No, they have a genuine understanding of the religions they try to make parody of. It's very subtle. It's very small. They actually read the materials. They actually try to talk about philosophical questions about what is God, what's the meaning of my creation, can I fight against destiny, which is not unlike a lot of JRPG, but with Breath of Fire it feels like it deals with a lot more Western culture than the Eastern culture, and it tried to actually understand them. It tried to be part of them.
And it deals with them more directly. I think that's a very good point, because what I was thinking was that it deals with them more personally, right? Because with Ryu as a point of view character, and with characters like Bo in 2 and Rei and Tipo in 3, who are so directly affected by these divinities and their agents, I think it's a more personal confrontation with faith and with some of these darker topics. But you make a really good point in that it's a much more realistic one. It's more direct, because series like Final Fantasy and the Xeno series deal with the issues of religion and faith in a much more indirect way. They don't usually challenge real faith systems. They have kind of proxies. They invent gods and have a very fictional worlds and very obviously fictionalized depictions of faith. But especially with Breath of Fire 2, we have what is very clearly the Roman Catholic Church being criticized and being scrutinized, and that decision was very gutsy on Capcom's part, and I think it makes the game very unique, because we're not dealing with some kind of imaginary deity. We're not dealing with an imaginary church. It feels very real, and this juxtaposition of a kind of a false Western god, in this case, a very malevolent figure in Death Evans, with the traditional dragon god, who is more analogous to Shinto gods, sort of traditional nature gods. We very clearly see people suffering. We see the characters in this world suffering under the effects of this misuse of faith. And to me, that feels much more powerful than the depictions in Final Fantasy and the Xeno series, which are much more remote. Like in Xenoblade, we have a false god in a very complex story who's depicted in a very complex way, but the application of this idea of the god, of this divinity, is so remote, that the world is so remote from our world that we can only appreciate it as a kind of a distant story. We can't relate to it in terms of any kind of a faith experience that we have actually had.
I thought for one part they did something very cool, very closer, because I don't know if anyone remember, when you start Breath of Fire 1, you actually wake up from a dream as well. Just instead you have actually benevolent god, which is later in Breath of Fire 3 named London. I don't think Landon. I don't think it's the same one. I mean, you could assume it's the same one. And this god encourages you to go out and fight, and you see it. It's very Eastern type of culture, very Hinduism type of religious. It pushes you to go behind and fight, and ironically, the second game starts with a voice encouraging you to wake up and worship God in just the same manner. Just it's not the god. And throughout Breath of Fire 2, like there's small statuettes of the Force god from Breath of Fire 1. They did it beautifully, and they did it with a core understanding of the idea of how to better create better villains. If they tried...
Breath of Fire is, in my mind, a series of real subversion. They know how to take a trope or an idea and turn it on its head and say, make you say, oh my God, wow, what is this? I mean, I think that we were all floored by the appearance of Beruberi in the beginning of 2, and I think that many people were shocked at some of the events of Breath of Fire 4 in their sheer cruelty, in what is done to Faolu, in his reaction to the humans who do these things to him, and in the very foul experiments of the High Minister.
Capcom always tried to shift away the demonic aspect. I mean, if in the first game it was one side trying to take over the world, in the second game it's a god, in the third game it's definitely everything, in the fourth game it's the humans they try to protect. So all in all, it's very powerful. We would definitely expand on this issue in the future podcast, but it's just one of the ideas that we tried to talk about, even briefly, to just explain why we love this series so much. In terms of I think it's very important to mention that both me and you, Jordan, are very interested in stories. We love culture, we love mythology. We are very into legend and myths and a lot of lores from areas around the world. So the idea that this series pay an homage, but do it beautifully by saying we want to understand the subject and not just take something and incorporate it into the world. We actually want to build something that could be made from this world that will fit to explain phenomena that happen in our current real world. That's a beautiful way to look at things.
Right. So. And this segues into something that I wanted to talk about, a little bit more fully, which is Breath of Fire's incorporation of various world mythologies, of the mythologies of Japan and China, and occasionally touches even of the Middle East, and certainly more Western mythological ideas that, unlike, again, Final Fantasy, because that's sort of the main contention, right? It's the primary rival when it comes to JRPGs. It's the Mac Daddy of them all because Final Fantasy has obviously had the most success and resonated the most with fans. The comparisons are inevitable. Unlike in Final Fantasy, which borrows, as you said earlier, names and concepts from mythology, but incorporates them and weaves them into an obviously fantasy world that really has no bearing on our own world. Breath of Fire takes these ideas and of course creates its own world, but creates one that is very analogous to our own in many ways. The Church of Breath of Fire 2, the Empire of Breath of Fire 4 that is obviously analogous to the historical Empire of China. Breath of Fire, I think, more coherently draws on these ideas and presents them in a familiar form so that it can treat the subject matter more directly.
Definitely. And it just builds a beautiful world that we can enjoy. I keep telling you that the only JRPG that made me feel the same way was the game that I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name in Japanese. I'm just going to directly say how it's supposed to be in English. Treasure of the Rodra. We tried to do something that made me feel completely the same way as the first and second game made me feel, and it also not trying to force the plot. But we will probably explain more about it.
So another thing that I think makes the series really unique is its characters. For my money, Breath of Fire has the single best characters of any JRPG series on the planet, and
Agreed.
I say that as a huge Final Fantasy fan. There are very few characters from the series that I don't love, or at least find very memorable. And I find this very fascinating because one of the things that I think makes them unique, aside from the fact that they're obviously anthropomorphic, they're sort of animal people, is that despite this, animal theme, the characters are very real. They, unlike, again, the characters in Final Fantasy who are struggling with these very kind of nebulous universal concerns about crystals and these, villainous empires and things like this, the characters in Breath of Fire are typically dealing with real problems. They're poor. They're facing being orphaned in the case of Ryu 2, right? They don't have enough food to eat. Ryu and Tipo and Rei in 3 are very seriously struggling to put food on the table, and then you have characters like Ox from the first game. Right, they're having trouble paying rent. They're being carted around in garbage cans because they're being accused of theft, and things like this. And it's comical, which is another great thing about the series we're going to talk about in a minute, is just the sheer humor of it. But some of these things are very farcical and over the top, but they still feel very real, I think, in a way that the Mana series and Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger do not. And it strikes a really unique balance because Breath of Fire can be very lofty and deal with some very lofty themes, but it brings it down to earth with real humor and earthiness. It feels real, despite all of the bigger themes.
I do want to mention that I think it's a general Capcom thing. I think that Capcom has a great way to write characters, especially characters from around the world. They feel real. They feel their own being, like they're developed and being known. And as you mentioned previously about Ryu and Bo handling troubles, I think that every character from any game has dealt with a lot of subject. Being Cat, dealing with the idea that she doesn't really understand who she is. She never saw another of her creature. Or Nina had, from Breath of Fire 1, had to deal with the fact that her father was sick, and she knew the whole kingdom is lying on her shoulder. And you have Bo that is caught, Bo from Breath of Fire 1, that is caught in the middle of two racist semi-truce, where one city tried to destroy the other because they don't understand each other. The other think that they are a monster, and a lot of very lovable, even enemies. For example, Cor or Carla from Breath of Fire 1, who's a monster girl and can find her own place, and that's why she turned like to the Empire. So even though they are creatures that don't resemble us, I always feel like Breath of Fire, different races in a sense can just sit very nicely in any futuristic type of games where you deal with a lot of space race and aliens,
it touches
but they still
on
feel
things
real.
like tribalism and cultural identity in a very unique and very relatable way. You know, it's a fun, fascinating way to do it. And I also agree with your point about how Capcom tends to feel more global because you go back to, you know, Street Fighter 2, right? The World Warriors were from all across the world.
Exactly.
And that was something that fighting games at the time weren't really doing.
And not just that. I mean, other series like Power Stone, they nail it pretty good. I feel like Capcom knows how to write character that has different identity and different races, and even different genders. So I think first of all, I really want to mention that like it's very good that it's been written by people like Capcom. Now, even though there are humans in Breath of Fire series, they're still debatable because they still seem to have some kind of lingering traces. My issue is that Capcom really didn't know what to do with it. Like, what exactly going on? Are there humans or creatures that appear to be less having amorphic animal type of thing? So it's very confusing, but aside of that, they still feel real. They still feel part of the culture. They still feel exactly like elves or drow or other creature from, I don't know, Star Trek or Wars universe be in an alien like corresponds. So it works, and it works great because they are not just dead for the sake of being a character. Like I still feel like in Final Fantasy, for example, they creating a creature for the sake of creating creature, bunny woman or cat humans just for the sake of it, or even Fire Emblem does it, but with Breath of Fire it feels like it's part of the world. It's just that they just look different.
It does feel more like it springs naturally from the nature of this world and this mythology that they've created. Because for one thing, that's another thing that sort of sets apart Breath of Fire, especially from Final Fantasy, is that the games are more or less interconnected. There's not a very strong sense of continuation between games specifically, but there's a very strong sense that they're all connected in the same world, and that's kind of unique. But I want to touch again, going back to this idea of the humor of Breath of Fire. I want to touch on this, as the kind of final note about what makes the series, so distinct in the JRPG niche, and that's the sheer comedy of it, right? And because again, in my experience, there's no RPG series out there as funny as Breath of Fire. I've never laughed out loud, with any other series, RPG or otherwise.
And I think it's mostly because they don't try to crack jokes. You don't have characters that just stand there and doing stand-up comedy or doing some kind of talk show. It just happen naturally, like a scene in life, like something that you will expect to see in talk show. It's very natural, and that's why it's laughing. It's laughable. I mean, for example, the fact that you have Rand's mom coming out of nowhere and hit her son with a stick. I mean, I could definitely see my mother
this humanoid
doing that
appearing woman is coming out of nowhere and beating this giant armadillo man. This very muscular, Hulk-like armadillo man over the head with a frying pan, and he's terrified of her, right? Because we can all relate to that because, no matter how big you are, you could be, 6'7" or whatever, and this big hulking dude, and you're still going to be afraid of your mom because she's your mom.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's face it.
Definitely. Not just that. I mean, the whole. I still can't believe you call it John. I call it Jean. Our lovable
He's French,
frog
baby.
dog.
Come on.
Jean.
Hey, Jean.
Rin. Anyway, like our frog guy, definitely is a comedian. Definitely is there. We have Stan. We have Urshan.
Bo from Breath of Fire 2 was
And
very funny. Blue was very funny in the original Breath of Fire, as was Gobi.
she was also very good, like in the two, especially.
She was really funny in 4, yeah.
In 3 as well.
And she had a few good moments in 3, but I think she was more directly humorous in 4, but definitely has some funny moments in 3.
So it's more natural. It doesn't feel like a character standing out of the way, even though I think one of the moments that makes me like recall something being very unique is like if you go to Final Fantasy VI and you have those two characters respond to what's her name, Terra, doing magic, so they're completely break off characters and start to move around like the battle section instead of like standing still, like they're going all around being excited about her using magic. That's kind of cool, but it still feels forced. Doesn't feel natural. I feel like
my biggest example of the Final Fantasy brand of humor is Gilgamesh, who is held up as probably the kind of fan favorite comedy character of the series, and I think that he's funny, but to me he's more like a Deadpool character. He exists solely for the punchline, right? And he's a character that sort of just is there to deliver one-liners and appear unexpectedly and be very zany and almost like Bizarro-esque, almost sort of breaking the fourth wall or whatever. And it's amusing, but to my taste, it gets sort of old and it can't compete with characters like Gobi and Jean. And even the lesser characters, like I said, that aren't directly humorous, like Deis and her funny moments, who
what is name?
As you said, are just sort of naturally.
What is name? Khan, that guy.
Khan in 4, yeah. I mean, he's and he's somewhat similar to Gilgamesh, but he's not as over the top, or certainly not as zany. He's, granted he fits into kind of a trope. He's a cliche of this kind of, super macho man or whatever, but so genuinely funny, just the way that he just can't give up. He can't stop. He's on this quest and no matter how many times you knock him down, he keeps coming back. And
kind of like Bilo and Thunder when you think about it.
Right. And I think it's unfair and unfortunate that more JRPG fans, aren't aware of these great, comedic characters in Breath of Fire, because I think they easily stand up to the ones in Final Fantasy and surpass them in my mind. But I think it's about time that we get to some of the audience questions. We're going to do fishing for questions. This is our way of talking to the fans and getting the community involved. So let's go straight to a few of these questions.
Let's start by saying that we ask all of you to participate and send us things that you want us to discuss or things that you ask us and want us to have our opinion. So first of all, we really want to thank each and everyone that took the time to respond to us. We do hope that we'll get more feedback from you and more responses in the future, because we're looking forward to it. Like whenever we start to develop the idea for podcast, we definitely take everything that you wrote and every comment you said into consideration. So big thumbs up for our great community. And we look forward to use some more feedbacks and ideas and questions for our future podcasts.
Yes, because this is first and foremost a podcast for the fans. The Breath of Fire community is so amazing and so cohesive, and it's remained strong through so many years of inactivity of the series, and it's a really remarkable thing. So please keep the questions coming, and know that we truly appreciate you for reaching out to us and letting us know what you think. So the first question comes from Breath of Fire and Knuckles on the Breath of Fire Discord, who asks, which character connected with you the most? So what do you think about that, Livnat?
Which character most? Well, it gotta be Nina. I mean, that's my name handle too. Which
one?
I definitely responded well to the first and the second one. I think the first is kind of a little bit more like me because she's a little bit more cheerful and outgoing. I did like the fact that she just did things sometimes without thinking ahead. I definitely do feel a lot like sometimes the second Nina. She's very shy and humble and majestic, but at the same time she's very fierce and doesn't afraid to do things to protect her friend. But sometimes she has no trouble sacrificing herself in the process. I really love the way those characters were written. Very beautiful characters.
I've got no doubt about mine. It's definitely Rand from Breath of Fire 2. I love the way he was introduced, as this kind of a simple, relatively amoral character to begin with. He's not some kind of a do-gooder. He's just at the bar and you have to meet him at night and he's just kind of doing his thing. But he slowly grows into a more sympathetic character because although he appears like a big muscle-bound lout, he's a mama's boy at heart, and he's trying to find his way in the world. And I just really relate to him as the kind of a strong, silent type who's trying to find his way in the world in his own simple way.
Yeah.
And there are others that are up there. As far as characters that I love, like I love Jean, and I relate to him as a goofball. I relate to a number of the characters, but I think Rand is certainly the one that I find myself closest to. So everyone from the Breath of Fire Discord said, when asked about the most compelling feature of Breath of Fire, probably its atmosphere. Most of the characters are not human, and the protagonist can transform into a dragon. And I think that hits the nail on the head for a large part of the appeal of Breath of Fire. I think the atmosphere is underrated. The music, for one thing, is very underrated. I love the soundtrack for all of the games. I'm more partial to a few of them.
Go fly. Yeah.
Aside from what now?
From Go Fly.
No, the Fly Pudding is the greatest track in RPG history. And
yeah, but not when
I'll
you need to listen to
otherwise.
it, like the entire segment. Oh my God.
Baby, it was taken directly from Mozart. Okay, it's high classical music. It's high culture.
Not disrespect to culture or anything, but if I be forced to listen to something for over an hour, I would hate it. I guess that's one of the reasons I never put my favorite song as an alarm song or as a ringtone music, because I'm really afraid to grow into hate those type of music. So yeah.
I can understand that, but I still love the song. But the whole non-human characters, I agree with that. As we've talked about before, I think that's a huge part of its appeal. And Ryu being able to transform into a dragon, it would have been one thing if there had been just a dragon kind of lumbering around with you in the party, like a pet dragon or something, but just a full-fledged dragon guy, or just a full-fledged dragon, but having this kind of a hybrid who transforms is I think kind of a unique feature, and it's very well done in 3 and 4 with the fusion system too. I think
they did it very well, like in 3, for example, because it let you give the mindset of being a very powerful creature. I think there's a lot of games where you have NPCs that are dragon or, part of it, but you definitely not in many games you play as the dragon. So that's very nicely done. Definitely, I agree with you on the music aspect. All the games have phenomenal soundtrack. I can listen for them for hours. I definitely also love the general setting of being of not being completely dramatic, but still very emotional at the same time, because the games always deal with a lot of sad topic and a lot of stuff, a lot of story, a lot of mini quests. Actually don't have a lot of they don't always lose the ends. and a lot of stuff remain for question and interpretation. And for example, what happened to Ryu, what happened to a lot of characters, especially with the bad endings. We don't have a true ending for each and every one of them, but at the same time we feel like that the main story is resolved. So those type of games always make you to still think and have like the process be with you. Again, it's a very Capcom thing. They really love doing that, but it just work with Breath of Fire as an RPG.
I agree. So in another one from everyone, we have, so I like how the characters are not human. Ryu is a dragon, Nina can become a bird, Bo is a wolf man, Gobi is a fish man, Karn appears human but apparently not because he can fuse, Ox is, well, an ox man, Deis is a snake woman, and Mogu is a mole man. And again, yeah, I think most fans of the series feel the whole anthropomorphic thing. Maybe it appeals to the Saturday morning cartoon fan in all of us. I think the sad truth is that Disney and other animators may have inadvertently or otherwise turned us all into furries on some level. We may all have been corrupted, as youth. Certainly in America, I'm assuming in the rest of the world, because Liv Not, I think you were corrupted as well. And but in all seriousness, and it's not just that the characters are not fully human, but the sheer variety of the characters, right? As you pointed out, you have a bird and a wolf and a fish, and all of these things, and some of which are very unique. In gaming, you don't see too many ox characters or mole characters, at least as main characters in JRPGs. So it is kind of cool. So Kimiyake says, I really dig the setting, characters, and how they interact. And we've talked about how kind of full and lush the setting is, and how well developed the mythology and the general world are, and how the games kind of interconnect. And I agree that the characters are a huge strength. And with the interaction thing, it reminds me of Township, and that very unique way of showing character interaction, where you're not forced to hear the inter-character dialogue, but you can go and seek it out if you so choose.
That's actually goes both way about if you go to Breath of Fire 3 and 4, this happens in their camp scene, which you could completely miss out. I just think the Township had it a little bit cooler, mostly because they have dialogues about public dialogue if they're in the party, and a town in the room kind of dialogues where like they will say more things or completely different things. That's a very cool way, interesting way to make it works, like having the characters be real. Like, I know that a lot of people would have trouble saying what's on their mind in public, or sometimes they want their space to whisper to you some stuff. So they did it in a very interesting way. The only problem I had with this was that it just worked better in the first game and in later games, because you didn't had to level each and every one of them separately. You didn't need to go all the way back to town or all the way to some kind of dragon statuette to change the party member. It just worked better when all of them were there and everyone and the dialogue of everyone could be. But it did allow replayability, because each character responds differently and say different dialogues in each and every scene. So you definitely want to take them to play the game a few times to have different players and outcome, especially in the final scene with that Evan.
And that's so beautiful, the way that all of their kind of fates and their motivations are discussed in such cool terms. And that's a good point. I think that's a huge factor in the replayability for the game. From @TF Outer Space on Twitter, we have played through 2 way back when, rented it and got to beat it when I rented it and got same copy again. Great story, themes, illusions, and the fight animations were badass. Total agreement there. not to mention a sense of humor and replayability with town system. And that's a very good point. I think Township is very unique, and we are very much going to discuss it in greater depth in our Breath of Fire 2 episode, which is upcoming very
can
very
we just
soon.
pause a moment and talk about the fact that Breath of Fire 2 just nailed it with the animation? I mean, at least for the girls. Like, you have,
I totally agree.
Deis or Blow having her tail flipped, and Nina with her wings, and Cat with her ears and tail, and how like Nina showing off the skin, and Cats have her boobs like swaying all over, and it's just so beautiful, and I loved it.
You're getting me excited there.
It's true though. They just nail it.
No, they really are done well, and Kat, feels like a living thing when you watch her with the animations. She looks real. She looks very believable, and Nina is very well done. I fully agree, and Jean is very sprightly and full of
I love the battle system with Spare. With how like his magic completely affect the world, or like Nina magic can just freeze the water if you're underwater. It's just amazing, like those small attention to details.
Oh, I do love that, and I love that Spark called on nature, and it depended on your environment. It made the world around you feel more real than in other JRPGs.
They just did a lot of things that they,
without a doubt,
my mind couldn't like bring back, aside maybe Breath of Fire 5, where like the whole battle scene is about how you interact with it before the battle and after the battle, so whatever happened like kind of affected. I always feel like the Breath of Fire 5 was a spiritual continuation of 2, but we'll get to it at some point. Okay.
Right. The background stuff and the fight animations get to me at this idea that when developing the graphics for a game, in the graphical design for a game, it's not so much about simply making it pretty for pretty's sake. It's about bringing the world to life and making it feel more real, because we've got nearly photorealistic games now that to me feel somewhat automated, that don't draw me in or immerse me, whereas Breath of Fire 2 had these simple 16-bit sprites in this kind of a simple anime style, and
exactly.
it paid attention to the details, and it made the characters feel like they were living,
exactly.
and it made
it's
the environments
so cute.
feel like they were alive, and like we were actually occupying these environments. Just having the foresight to make the backgrounds match the actual environments that we're in at whatever point in the story was a huge design choice that to me really made it stand apart from especially Final Fantasy, and even things like Chrono Trigger, where the battles take place more or less sort of on the overworld. The overworld didn't seem to play as much of a factor in the battles as it did in Breath of Fire 2 especially, and I thought that was a tremendous design decision.
You don't have the whole pausing and get into the scene and the music stuff. No, they just pause where they are and took off the weapons, like completely getting to the point, not making like the battle feel forced or annoying. They also put a lot of attention to stuff that character can do outside of battle, like if Nina can call the great bird, or Bo can hunt, and so on. So they did it very well.
I agree. So from @Lege or Lege, forgive me, 12 on Twitter, it's one of the best series that is so underappreciated and deserves a ton more attention. From the amazing storytelling to the unique battle systems, diverse environments, and beautiful music, Breath of Fire is amongst the best RPGs ever. # bring back Breath of Fire. And of course, love this one. Couldn't agree more. It's criminally underappreciated.
Exactly.
And it does deserve more attention. Yeah, and as we were just discussing, the environments are a huge factor. The attention to detail, the music is very underrated. I'm a particular fan of the soundtracks from 2, 3, and 4, but I love 1 and 5 as well. And again, couldn't agree more. Hashtag bring back Breath of Fire. Hashtag we desire Breath of Fire. Put them out there. Let's really try to get Capcom to bring the series back, because I don't think that the series is done. I think that it has more life in it.
I think Capcom knows there's more life to it, but at the end of the day, it's not enough. We need to show that we need this series to grow, that we need Capcom to bring it back, that it's worth to put effort and a lot of attention to the series. And I'm sure we will get to it by any means, especially when we have so many people that are still active and willing to show support for this game.
People call it a dead series, but let's face it, it's not a dead series. A series is only dead when the fandom dies, and the Breath of Fire community is very much alive and well. Just go and search Twitter, and you don't even have to look for the hashtags. Just search for Breath of Fire and look at the amazing artwork. Look at t-shirt designs. Look at the Discord. Just look at the community that still exists for a series that it has been on life support at best for over 10 years at least, and hasn't had a main game in well over 10 years. And you'll see a pretty amazing fandom that is very dedicated and very passionate. And I think that it's very possible to tap into that. And at least I think, even for a digital only game, maybe just something, a remake, give us something to subsist on for a while, just to throw something to these fans that are obviously so willing to continue their support of the series.
Because I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough series that has this much of fandom that willing to support it, even though the series is not very maintained. All in all, I think this was a great start for a series of podcasts. Don't you agree, Jonathan?
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that you've all enjoyed it. I hope it's been a good listen. We're going to be back hopefully sometime soon with our next episode, which is going to be about Breath of Fire 2. We had originally wanted to start with the first game, get into what exactly was the beginning of the series, but because Breath of Fire 2 was recently ported to Switch, which we're very excited about and want to talk more about, we're going to go ahead and tackle Breath of Fire 2 because, first of all, it's our favorite game. Livnat and I are agreed on that. And it was my introduction to the series. To me, it will always represent the best of Breath of Fire. And we're very excited that a new generation of fans is going to be able to have access to this great, underrated gem of a game.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot to talk about this game. I'm not saying we're going to completely forget Breath of Fire 1. I mean, one of the reasons we wanted to bring this forward was because we felt like Breath of Fire 1 needed more love, but we will get to it at some point in the future because we definitely have a lot to add to it.
We will get to Breath of Fire 1 and every other game in the series because this podcast is intended to be really and truly a love letter to Breath of Fire and the dedicated Breath of Fire fandom. We don't want to leave anything out. We know that there are some fans who are not particularly fond of the first game, the second game, even the third and fourth games, and certainly of Dragon Quarter. But we actually love them all. We're unique in that we played and enjoyed all of them to varying degrees, and we're going to give them all a good look and hopefully show them the love that they deserve and go into depth about what makes them work, maybe some of the things that didn't work, and maybe what Capcom can do going forward to learn from some of their mistakes and make a stronger series, hopefully, in the future. So on that note,
this is where you guys are coming to play. This was a start. We definitely need more ideas and comments and opinions and a lot of love from you because your ideas give us more ideas for stuff to talk about, and we sure have a lot to talk about regarding Breath of Fire.
We do. So on that note, I hope you look forward to the next episode. Hope that you will check us out on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else Dragon Song can be found, Stitcher, of course, and SoundCloud, and all the good places, the usual places that you hopefully know or will come to know. And again, we hope you enjoyed. We thank you very much for checking us out and listening, and we hope you'll continue to be a part of the Dragon Song family, the brood, as it were. And on that note, we will hope that you're doing well, and we'll catch you later.
This is Live and Lit, and we will catch you guys later.
Later.